F1 on 5 Live.
Hello from a bit of a dreary Austria. The blue skies of yesterday have gone away and we are greeted with the remnants of a drizzly morning. Low cloud cover and a damp track. Gone are the views of the mountain tops, but we look set to see cars out on track shortly for the second sprint shootout of the year. Welcome to Sprint Saturday, and if anything Grand Prix qualifying yesterday is to go by, if you had track limits or lap deleted on your bingo card, well, you're probably in for another good day today. My name is Harry Benjamin. Joining me to guide you through all the coverage just about is the former Williams driver Jack Aitken. Welcome back to the commentary box, Jack. Great to have you here yesterday. It was Verstappen's day once again in qualifying yesterday, but even the two-time champ came a cropper of having his laps deleted.
Yeah, I think nearly everybody on the grid had a problem at some stage, and it was mounting the pressure as we got to the final stage of quali, because the risk of losing your lap and ending up right at the back of the that portion of the grid anyway was really high. So difficult for them to manage, but yeah, in the end it was the same old story, sadly.
Well, we'll see what the sprint shootout brings. Also joining us is the BBC's chief F1 writer, Andrew Benson. And Andrew, a bit of sad news to start with before we get properly into the track action about Bob Fernley, the former, well known for being the former Force India F1 deputy to Vijay Mallya, has sadly passed away. A widely respected and well-liked man who will be sorely missed from the paddock.
Indeed, he was 70 years old. He'd been suffering with cancer for the last little while, and unfortunately he lost his battle yesterday. He was a very popular character within Formula One. He had a kind of sort of 1970s touring car team manager vibe to him, and obviously I knew him quite well through my professional role, and he was always kind and helpful. And one of the times I remember was in Bahrain in 2012. It was the year when Formula One went back to Bahrain, the year after the Arab Spring, when they'd missed the race the year before. And there was still a lot of civil unrest there, and the Force India mechanics got caught in a riot on the motorway on their way back to Manama on the Wednesday night, and they decided that, on the Thursday night, they decided they didn't want to travel back to the circuit back to the city from the circuit in the dark. And someone told me about this before anyone else knew about it, and I rang Bob up just to confirm whether it was true or not, and he was completely open and frank about the situation, talked very eloquently about it. So they were basically going to miss second practice. So I ran the story on the BBC website, and next thing I knew, my phone rings. Hello, Eccleston here.
Uh-oh.
Do you want to be a political correspondent or something? And we had a exchange of views about whether I should have written the story or not. Has Bob been blurting his mouth out, has he? To which I said no, because it wasn't actually Fernley who'd told me about it in the first place. But it was a measure of Bob's character that he would just be absolutely open and frank about something like that. Really likeable guy, and yes, he will be sadly missed.
Yeah, well, all of our thoughts, and indeed the entire Formula One world's thoughts, are with Bob's family and friends as well. But as racers, we all want to see track action and get racing, and we are just about ready then for the sprint shootout. So this is the second of the sprint weekends that we've had this year. Cast your minds back to Baku in Azerbaijan for the fourth round of the season, was where we last saw a bit of sprint action. So we've had the Grand Prix qualifying. That was all yesterday. So the grid for Sunday is set, and Max Verstappen gets a fourth consecutive pole position. We start again from zero, basically, for the sprint shootout here. Similar knockout vibes. The top five, the bottom five, I should say, are eliminated from this first SQ1 session, but the time is slightly shortened. It's only 12 minutes they have for this first session, and they are already queuing up and desperate to get out on track. And this is going to be an interesting one, Andrew, because we don't quite know how damp or wet the track is at the moment, so that could really knocked the whole tyre rule out of contention.
Yeah, and one guy is under a special pressure today, and that is Sergio Perez, who completely messed up his qualifying yesterday. Jack was saying how all the drivers were struggling with track limits. They were, but he struggled so much. Even when he had to get a banker lap in at the end of Q2, he didn't manage it. He exceeded the track limits at the final 2 corners, and he didn't make it out of second qualifying. That was the 4th race in a row. And I think within Red Bull, they're saying all the right things publicly at the moment, but he will definitely be feeling it, because this is the sort of performance, after he started the season, looking like he might be a championship contender. Not that anyone in Formula 1 really believed he could hold it to Max Verstappen all year, but his season's completely imploded in the last 4 races with a series of mistakes, crashing in Monaco and so on and so forth. And these are not the conditions that Perez needs on a day when he really needs to, up his game and get things sorted.
Well, the green light has come on at the end of the pit lane, and we have begun the first SQ1, the first shootout for this sprint qualifying, and we have a mixture of tyres. Well, actually, the majority are going out on the slick, the soft compounded tyre, but Alex Albon, once again, showing a bit of tyre savviness, perhaps, is on the intermediate tyre, as is Oscar Piastri. We wait to see the rest of the field trundle out of the pits. It's very uphill on the approach to turn 1, and as such, so is the pit lane exit. And I just looking as well, Kevin Magnussen, he's gone out on the mediums. We've got Logan Sargent is another on the intermediate. So the 2 Williams, Jack, going for the Inters.
Yeah, quite surprised to see that, to be honest. We haven't seen the whole track yet, but we've had a few images coming through, and there is a definite dry line on the straights, and I just wonder if they know something that we don't. Well, as I say that, the first Williams of Sargent, that looks like, is boxed immediately, as has Albon, so they might just have been scrubbing in those inters.
And also, I think it's a slight exploratory situation at the moment, because quite a lot of drivers have gone out on used softs rather than new softs, so they're not looking to, that would suggest they're not looking to set a time on this very first out. So, for example, Sainz, Leclerc, Hamilton, Perez, Stroll, etc., Alonso, all on used softs while they try and work out what the track conditions are like.
And to be honest, I think the track conditions are leaning towards being far more dry than they are wet. There is a slightly darker shade of the surface off the racing line, where it has rained this morning. We had the Formula 3 racing action this morning where it was really pouring down with rain before the start of that, but it has dried up nicely. There is definitely a dry line. Let's see what Sainz has to say.
I have a brake-by-wire failure. Let me know. Brake-by-wire failure. The pedal feels strange. Brake pedal feels strange.
Well, that is a worrying start to this qualifying, Jack.
Yeah, brake-by-wire failure, it's never something you want to hear, because the brakes in these cars are not controlled completely by mechanical lines, as it were. There is an electrical element to it as well to help regulate the MGU regen and managing all of that side. We do have a yellow flag in Sector 3. We'll see that in a minute. And the feeling that he's talking about on the pedal can go very, very soft if you have a brake-by-wire failure, because the system all goes out of whack, and it can, in extreme circumstances, basically lead to a complete brake failure on one axle in practical terms. But it looks like he's up to speed, so they must have done a reset. Here's his radio again.
I'm waiting, guys. Say something.
So we are on the mechanical system, on box.
Yeah, so they haven't managed to solve that. So as they say, they're just completely relying on the mechanical side of the brake system there, which cannot provide the full force required to really slow the car down. You need that electrical element to help as well and get the regen effect from the rear axle.
Well, a disaster start then to this sprint shootout for Carlos Sainz, who is back in the garage, has been put up on the jacks and wheeled back in. So work to do then on that Ferrari of Sainz. Now, we are 8 minutes already to go until we get to the end of this first shootout. And the first timings have been coming in thick and fast. And Max Verstappen goes across the line to go fastest, a 1:10.2. But how many times, Andrew, are we going to be saying the word track limits?
Well, I think he just exceeded them at turn 9, frankly. I think that's why you mentioned it. And so, yeah, not a good start. Hamilton, by the way, has made a flying start in the Mercedes. Both Hamilton and Russell were going quite well. But we're getting some times coming in now from the big runners, including Alonso, Hamilton, and so on.
Yeah, this is the sound on board the 7-time champion coming into the final corner now. Turns 9 and 10, those last double right-handers with the pit lane entry to your right is where track limits is being watched the most. Hamilton abides by the rules and keeps all of his tyres the right side of the white line and goes second fastest, immediately eclipsed by the AlphaTauri of Nick De Vries, who goes with a 1:08.8 to the top of the timing so far, but still looking for a lot of runners to come through. Now, we had a yellow flag a little earlier. And that was Zhou Guanyu in the Alfa Romeo coming through the right-hander of turn 9 and losing the rear, and round he went, Jack.
That looks like it's the only real corner that's got any significant damp patch left to it, and it's right at the apex of turn 9, which is probably the highest speed apex of this circuit, so pretty daunting. We were on board with Hamilton and he was following another car fairly closely and got a big kick of spray from that car when he was right behind it. So yeah, still a little bit of peril to this. The fast times are coming in all the time, and Piastri now P1 with Russell P2, Tsunoda P3. Verstappen has got a lap in after that original lap was deleted in P4, and briefly we have another yellow flag in turn 9, turn 10 there.
Yeah, Logan Sargent in the other Williams is going rather well. I think he's just popped up into fourth, make that sixth, because he is dropping as other drivers come through. It's a different driver every time they go to the top of the timings. It's now Norris and Piastri 1 and 2, but Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin is just about to come across the line, and he puts that AMR into second place.
So Sargent has had that lap deleted, sadly, for going off track at turn 9, so he drops all the way down to 19th, and Perez having not his fast lap deleted, but a separate lap, so he's still struggling there. That would be a corner where it's going to be most difficult, is because of that wet patch pushing you offline at the apex.
This is the sound of Charles Leclerc. The last time we had a sprint race, well, he was the on the pole for that. So Leclerc hoping to try and replicate something. He came oh so close in yesterday's Grand Prix qualifying, really ragging that Ferrari around the final 2 corners, as he does so now, but he keeps it well within the lines. Leclerc comes across the line, and it's 7th for the Ferrari man. Right now, with just over 5 minutes left, it's Norris, Alonso, Tsunoda, Piastri, Russell the top 5, De Vries, Leclerc, Verstappen, Perez, Hamilton the top 10, Stroll, Hülkenberg, Ocon, Magnussen, Albon the top 15, at risk right now of elimination. Gasly, Bottas, Zhou, Sargent and Carlos Sainz, who is still in the pits with a possible brake-by-wire issue. So a lot of work with just under 5 minutes to see if they can get anything from that Ferrari in time. This is the sound of Alex Albon, who's just had a bit of a scary moment coming through turn 9, had to really get a wiggle on the steering wheel, keeps it pointing the straight direction though, and he finds almost 2.5 tenths clear at the top for Albon, a 1:07.5 ahead of Norris.
That was a really good little mini drift he had through the apex of 9. It's asking the drivers to commit on a dry entry, carry loads of speed in, and then tiptoe their way through and collect it all up on the exit without crossing the white lines, of course. We now see Perez and Verstappen coming through all in formation, and Perez goes P1 with 1:07.0, with Verstappen just a tenth behind, but on the medium tyre.
Yeah, and I think they'll be pleased with that one, because they didn't go over the white lines on that occasion. Perez currently fastest. This is the sound of Oscar Piastri in the McLaren, the Aussie rookie who comes across the line in 7th. We are now looking for Lando Norris, who has had an absolutely mega middle sector. He's currently 5th fastest, but he's finding time now in the final sector, coming through the last couple of corners now. The 2 right-handers, again, much like Albon, has to have a little wiggle on the steering wheel on the exit of 9. DRS, the rear wing flap, goes open along the main straight, and he loses a bit of time in that final sector, so he can't improve. Stays 5th for Norris.
We're now seeing an interesting split in strategy between cars, where not everybody has decided to box and take a new set on. And some cars have, even some going for the medium tyre, as mentioned. Verstappen, Magnussen, Bottas. I think I saw Russell on the medium, but it's not showing that on the reader. So it's all converging in the last 3 minutes here of the sprint quali, and Sainz is still in the pit lane. They've got probably about another minute and a half to get out of pit lane.
It's looking dicey for Carlos Sainz and Ferrari, still in the pits, still with no lap time. You're right, George Russell is on the medium compounded tyre and down in 10th at the moment, whereas his teammate, who's on the soft compounded tyre, the red wall tyre, the faster of the tyres, is currently up in 4th. It's Perez, Hülkenberg, Verstappen the top 3. Here's Piastri. And that was the Aussie complaining about the Ferrari of Leclerc in front of him, which was diving for the pit lane as Piastri was coming around at high speed into that right hand of turn 9. It's tricky though there, Jack, because that's where the pit lane entry starts.
Yeah, it's always been a problem area for this circuit, and I think in the qualifying you have to be super aware of cars that are pushing behind you before you commit to that pit entry. But it's been noted by the stewards, so they are going to possibly have a look at that. And we've now got all cars out on track except for Sainz. It doesn't look like he's going to get out. He's got about, like I say, 30 or 40 seconds if he wants to get out and start a lap, but it's not looking great. And it's going to be about who can get across the line last and set a clean lap and try and make the best of these conditions.
This is the sound of Carlos Sainz pulling out of his Ferrari garage and screeching those tyres. He might just get a lap time in. It's going to be touch and go, though.
That's as on edge as Jack Aitken's arrival in the commentary box this morning, isn't it, Harry?
Don't know what you're talking
Absolutely.
about. Perfectly timed.
I love that's all you wanted to chime in with as well. A minute and a half left of this sprint shootout. Ready to go then. A reminder, we are about to eliminate the bottom 5, and this will set the grid for the sprint race later on. At risk, Piastri, Gasly, Bottas, Leclerc, Zhou and Sainz. Piastri in the McLaren comes across the line though and gets up into the top 5. We are seeing at times change quite rapidly. Here's the other Ferrari, which hasn't had any brake problems that we know about compared to Carlos Sainz. This is the sound of Charles Leclerc round the final corner, well within the white lines and across the line for Leclerc, and he cannot improve. He'll have to go again. He's only 16th, and Norris goes right to the top in an upgraded McLaren, part of an incremental upgrade that they're bringing across the next 3 races.
Mode warm-up.
No more warm-up. Number of laps, come on.
One time lap.
So that was probably Carlos saying that we don't have time to do a proper warm-up procedure here. We need to dive straight into pushing, and he's right. They've got less than 30 seconds to cross the line. He is going to do it. They're going to get 1 lap, but that's all they're going to get.
Yeah, well, Leclerc is going again because he has to, really, and he is coming through the middle sector now. He's got a purple mini sector, but he's going to have to try and do a little bit better than that because Valtteri Bottas is also going well. This is the sound of Charles Leclerc coming through the left-hander of 7, then quickly into the slight right-hand kink. It's not really even a corner in Formula 1 terms of turn 8, and now the tricky turn 9 and 10 as Verstappen goes fastest. Leclerc currently down in 16th. He started on pole for the last sprint race. He's trying to replicate that, but right now is at risk of being knocked out of the bottom 5. He does find the time. It's good enough for 8th at the moment, though, only for Charles Leclerc. So what has Sargent got? Gasly, Bottas, Zhou, and crucially Carlos Sainz. He's in the middle sector now. Sainz, who has been in the pit lane for the majority of this race due to brake-by-wire issues, currently going through the middle sector now. He's found a huge chunk of time. He just needs to keep it within the white lines. No track limits errors, and this should see Sainz through to the second part of this sprint shootout.
He runs it very close on the exit of 9 and of 10. I think he was inside track limits, and he crosses the line. P1.
Sainz goes top. Now, all eyes on Lewis Hamilton, though, and I think Hamilton is going to be out here because he's currently down in 19th, and he's coming through the middle sector now, but he's got nothing. Hamilton is going to be out in 19th. Bottas has taken the checkered flag. He is the only driver behind him right now. It's all changed in this sprint shootout. Stroll crosses the line. He's 17th. That takes him up to 4th, though, with that lap time, and Leclerc back at risk. He won't get another go, but he will be just okay because everybody behind him is out. Zhou was the closest, 1,000th of a second in that Alfa Romeo, gets eliminated in 16th. Piastri in the McLaren is 17th. Logan Sargent is 18th. Here's Hamilton.
That was really bad time usage, man. Am I out?
Yes, we are.
Disaster for Lewis Hamilton, who does just, as I was saying, where he finished, a lap time was deleted by Logan Sargent, so Hamilton gets promoted to 18th, Bottas 19th, Logan Sargent in 20th. That is your bottom 5, but Charles Leclerc making it through by literally a whisker, 1,000th of a second. But the big name to go, Lewis Hamilton, as the team forlornly wheel that Mercedes back into its garage. It goes up on the jacks, and the fans are out, the tyre warmers are straight on, and Hamilton saying bad usage of time. Here's what his teammate has to say.
Hydraulic failure.
hydraulic failure, he's saying. So they've got some gremlins on that Mercedes. It doesn't look too frantic in the box, as if they're trying to fix anything. But I was just going to say, Hamilton would have qualified, but he had a lap deleted that was good enough for, it looks like, around P8. So that's really, really tough for them.
Yeah, he just blocked me in the last corner.
And that was the voice of Max Verstappen, who was coming out of the final corner right behind the Mercedes. I think it was Lewis Hamilton he was behind on the racing line and complaining about blocking. We're just seeing a magnificent replay of car control from the Williams of Logan Sargent again through turn 9 with that rear kicking out all over the shop. Rally style, but he keeps it together. George Russell. And you're probably right, Jack, with that Hamilton lap that was deleted, because Russell, his teammate, was around 7th place at the end of that. So you'd think Hamilton would be at least on par, if not quicker, on the soft compound of tyre, because George Russell did that on the medium compound of tyre. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, have a little breather. That was quite good at the end.
Can we have a word for Carlos Sainz? He went out at the start of the session, but then came out with a minute and a half remaining. His first flying lap, he was purple sector 1, and then he puts it on provisional pole. I mean, if that's not a stellar performance, I don't know what is. That's incredible adaptability in a changing condition session.
And that was Logan Sargent, not Carlos Sainz, definitely not. Logan Sargent on the opposite end of the timing board. He is 20th and last. A real shame for Sargent, who is coming under increased pressure for that seat in the Williams, especially now that he has the same upgrades that Albon has. Albon made it through in 12th, but absolutely magnificent work from Carlos Sainz to stay cool, calm and collected like that. He literally had one lap to do it in. He even had time to overrule his team on a bit of strategy as well, which we see that time and time again from Carlos Sainz. We don't see it so much from Charles Leclerc, as we get a lovely close-up of Leclerc's steely eyes, and he's looking at the cameras, which say you only made it through by 1,000th of a second.
Yeah, skin of his teeth, but he's through, and that's all that matters. So we'll see now. The track conditions will have settled a little bit for the second part of the shootout qualifying. Still going to be an improving track. There's still rubber going down all the time, but it's not going to be quite as critical this time around to be the last to cross the line and to make sure that lap is the one. You probably have a slightly bigger window of opportunity to set that time.
Good work as well from both the Hasses, both the AlphaTauris, getting through into the next part of qualifying, SQ2. So they'll be looking to improve on their Grand Prix qualifying that they had yesterday, although Nico Hulkenberg had a very good qualifying. He will start the Sunday's race from 8th place. Now, as Max Verstappen makes his way out of the garage, Lewis Hamilton has to pause outside. He's on his 2 feet. Verstappen is back in the car because he is through into the next session as Hamilton walks away.
So it would seem that Verstappen and Hamilton got tangled up with each other at the end of that session. I've been conversing with Mercedes. It seems that Verstappen was in Hamilton's way at turn 1 at the start of his final lap, after Verstappen felt Hamilton was in Verstappen's way at turn 10 at the end of the lap before. So we may be hearing a bit more about that, I think.
Well, even after yesterday's qualifying, Verstappen was called to the stewards for an investigation to explain the possible impeding that he may have inflicted on Kevin Magnussen's Haas. That was dismissed. So we've seen here in Austria at the Red Bull Ring in particular how the results could well change even after the checkered flag, whether that be track limits or impeding. So through to the next part, where we will eliminate the next bottom 5 drivers from 11th to 15th. We have Sainz, both Ferraris, both Red Bulls, both Hasses, both Aston Martins, just the one Mercedes of George Russell, both AlphaTauris, both Alpines, the one Williams of Albon, and that is who we have, and they are all already lining up at the end of the pit lane, awaiting for this next SQ2 session, which will be 10 minutes long, so a couple of minutes shorter than the usual qualifying we get. And also the points are less as well when it comes to the sprint race later on this afternoon. 8 points for the win, all the way down to 1 point for 8th place. So only the top 8 will get points from this. So there's less to lose, but in a tight championship like this is in the midfield. It is so tight, and yesterday at the end of Q1, for the first time ever, the entire field was split by less than a second. You have really got to be on it, and every point, every thousandth of a second counts as the green light comes on at the pit lane, and we are underway then for SQ2.
It looks like the majority of cars once again are starting with a scrubbed set of, or a used set of softs, opting to save the fresher rubber for later on. There was one Haas out on a brand new set of softs, but otherwise, yeah, everyone's going to use this first run as a bit of a sighter and very likely then move on to a new, fresh, shiny set for the second half of this session.
So, down at Ferrari, with this brake-by-wire failure worry, what would they have been doing in the garage for the majority of SQ1 to be able to then get him out in time for one lap?
Control-Alt-Delete.
You'd be surprised how often that's the answer, yeah. It could well have been as simple as that, although it took a bit longer than a reset would have taken, so it doesn't seem to have been as simple as that. But Trace is very likely an electrical gremlin, and those are a bit of a nightmare to trace down, especially in the middle of a session under a time crunch. So I won't claim to know what they might have fixed, but yeah, good job to do that just in the nick of time.
Well, this is the sound of Max Verstappen coming through turn one of this 4.3 kilometre, 2.6 mile. In these early laps, Jack, do you want to take us round on with Max?
Yeah, we've got the handy visor cam here. We just saw him make a brake balance change in the run up to turn 3. Big, heavy braking zone uphill. You get a bit of extra grip as the car compresses into the hill. Take the apex curb, very delicate on throttle on the way out as you crest over the top of the hill and scrabble for grip on the curb. Shape up for the braking of turn 4, going downhill this time. You have to watch that inside front, can lock very easily. Verstappen hooks up, avoids the curb out of choice at the apex, around back marker and into turn 6, the fast left-hander, the first of two of them, straight after one after the other. Use a bit of curb on the entry to open up 7, bit of banking in the middle of the corner to help you out, all of the curb on the exit up to the white line, and then get ready for the last 2 downhill right-handers into turn 9. It's still a little bit damp across the pit lane entry, and then into turn 10, big compression, get as close as you can to the sausage curb in the middle of the corner to maximise the track.
That was nice. Well, it was the only lap time so far, so it goes fastest to 1:05.6. Norris, though, comes across line in the McLaren, who has been going very well. It's a track Lando Norris loves here in Austria. A scene of his first podium, constantly up there in the McLaren, no matter how competitive it is. You always see Lando Norris towards the top of the timing threes, especially around this Red Bull ring. He loves this track, and he's currently second fastest in front of Ocon and Magnussen. Hulkenberg, the other Haas, gets up into the top 5. This is the sound of the other Red Bull of Sergio Perez. Fell foul of track limits yesterday, but today has so far been keeping it within the white lines, and he crosses the line. It's 5th for the Mexican.
Yeah, so first lap for him, about half a second off his teammate. The Ferraris cross the line, Leclerc putting in a 1:06.6, not too pacey just now, and Sainz not setting a representative lap. Alonso goes purple in sector 3 and just a few tenths shy of Verstappen in P2.
Yeah, everybody is out there except for George Russell in the Mercedes, still in the pits. And Russell saying after qualifying yesterday that, just not quite having the right feel with the car at the moment, especially in yesterday's qualifying. Different conditions today. It's a bit colder as well, so just over 17 degrees air temp, 23 degrees track temperature as well, as we see the Williams of Albon come across the line into 8th.
I wonder if they're still struggling with whatever issue it was that he'd flagged the team immediately after Q1 there, so potentially could be a hydraulic DNS issue, yes, for Russell in this session, and that would be an immediate elimination.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. He might not well get out. He was saying he had a hydraulic issue right at the end. He was coming into the pits at the end of SQ1, so we wait to see if Mercedes can provide us any news on that. Meanwhile, the 2 Ferraris are both out on track and are going faster. Sainz, the faster of the 2. He's into second. He's about 2.5 tenths off the back of Max Verstappen. Charles Leclerc came across just behind him and into 9th. So Leclerc, I know it's still early days, but is not quite on pace with Sainz right now.
He looks like he's struggling today, Leclerc, doesn't he, compared to yesterday? I mean, actually, to be fair, yesterday he built up to it slowly and then really nailed it with that spectacular lap right at the end of the session. But right now, he's nowhere near that sort of spectacular on the limit form that he was showing at the end of qualifying on Friday.
Lots of work going down in the Mercedes garage of George Russell's, particularly on the front end of that car. Absolutely surrounded by the Mercedes mechanics. With 5 minutes to go, it's another race against time for a driver in sprint shootout.
Yeah, it's going to be very tough for them, but they've got, three minutes to get out. We're on board with Tsunoda now, facing him and watching as he shapes up for a lap, opening up the last corner. But now switching over to see the Haas of Hulkenberg, and they've been strong again, the Haases today so far from what we've seen, showing again that their qualifying is their strong suit. But this time both of the Haases making it through rather than Magnussen, who unfortunately was eliminated early doors yesterday.
Yeah, Magnussen will start 19th for tomorrow's Grand Prix. Andrew.
So I've got an update from Mercedes. Russell is out. He won't be running again, they say, in this qualifying segment because of the hydraulic problem that you mentioned earlier, Harry, requiring a steering rack change.
And that's a big change, isn't it, Jack? And a double blow for Mercedes for this Saturday sprint.
Yeah, it was 15th and 18th starting for the sprint. That's going to be very much damage limitation, and they it'll be a conversation then of how much risk do you take? Do you risk the car at all for Sunday's Grand Prix?
Well, with just over 3.5 minutes then, Verstappen is currently fastest with a 1:05.6, 2 tenths ahead of his teammate Sergio Perez. This is the sound of Yuki Tsunoda in the AlphaTauri, frustrated yesterday with his Grand Prix qualifying, said he didn't maximise what he had, and he just comes across the line and he gets up into 10th. A reminder, we are looking to eliminate everybody from 11th downwards, which now currently includes Tsunoda, Leclerc, Nick de Vries, Pierre Gasly and George Russell, who will be out of this session due to a hydraulic issue which requires a steering rack change. He will not get out in time to even set a lap in this SQ2 session. So he is out. So at risk, Magnussen in 10th, Tsunoda, Leclerc, de Vries and Gasly in 14th, who is still in the pits actually, currently in 14th.
Stroll's showing a bit better this weekend as well. He's currently P6, Alonso P4, just under 2 tenths between them, so a little bit less of a gap than we've seen in previous weekends, and he seemed to be on good form yesterday, doing one of the rare managing to out-qualify Alonso, which is a rare occurrence this season. So he's found a bit of a rhythm here. Yeah,
only the second time he's been able to do that this season. This is the sound of Kevin Magnussen, who is having, as you were saying, Jack, a much better time of it in this sprint shootout qualifying than he was in yesterday. Rounds the final corner, up through the gears and across the line, and his second fastest for K-Mag, a 1:05.7, just a tenth and a bit behind Verstappen. But Ocon in the Alpine goes fastest. From Verstappen, Magnussen, Perez signs the top 5. So is this track evolution, or is this going to be last over the line?
I think that there's still going to be a bit of track evolution here. Some teams, again, choosing to go with a new set of softs. Quite a few, in fact, I'd say the vast majority. But yeah, the track's definitely still going to be rubbering in. We're going into the last couple of minutes now, and some cars filing out of pit lane, a few of them starting their first laps on this new set now.
And Leclerc being one of those on a fast lap, currently down in 12th. His first sector wasn't massively anything to shout about. He's a 10th off Albon in the first sector, but the grandstands are starting to get fuller and fuller ahead on this sprint Saturday. We're surrounded by the greenery of the Styrian Mountains in this idyllic natural bowl, really, that we find ourselves in this Alpine environment, and on such an undulating track as well, up and down, and it really does go over a crest, that Ferrari, as it now heads downhill into the second half of the track. A series of quick high-speed corners, and he's lost a huge chunk of time in the middle sector, has Charles Leclerc, as he only has a couple more corners to negotiate a double right-hander with the pit lane entry separating it in the middle. Meanwhile, his teammate Carlos Sainz goes to the top, a 1:05.4, and over a tenth and a half clear of Ocon. Leclerc has lost a little even more time. I think he well and truly backed off at the end of that lap.
I wonder if he backed off of that early because he saw a gaggle of cars come out in front of him in sector 2, and he's only got time for one more, so he may have switched over to the recharge, and I think that's exactly what he's done. He's just built up enough battery to go again, because he's got one lap left and he's less than 0.04 of a second off off Albon, I should say.
Yeah,
through
that's
the first
the thing,
sector.
though. It's off Albon in the Williams.
It is a green sector, though, so it's still an improvement, and most of the time for the Ferrari you'd think would come through sector 2, which is where he is now. Pitches the car into turn 4, not quite using all the track on the exit. He doesn't look quite as confident as his teammate at this stage, and the car, visibly, the body language isn't as aggressive, but he's carrying good speed across sector 2, and he is just under 3 tenths up on Albon.
Yeah, this should be able to get Leclerc through. If he can keep it together in these final couple of corners. Albon is the driver at risk in 10th. Leclerc currently sitting in 11th and screams past turn 9 into 10. Sparks fly, has a little bit of a moment, nearly sent that Ferrari wide, but he keeps it within the track limits, and it's 4th for Leclerc. Still about 4 tenths, 2.5 tenths, I should say, off of his teammate Carlos Sainz, who is the fastest of them all at the moment, as the checkered flag is out for this sprint shootout, the second part, SQ2. This is the sound of Lance Stroll across the line, and the Aston Martin doesn't improve. He stays in 9th spot. Verstappen comes across the line, though, to go fastest. At risk, Hülkenberg, Albon, Tsunoda, Gasly, De Vries, all looking to try and find a way to improve. I think our attention has to turn to Pierre Gasly, but he can't make it through. Only 12th for the Alpine racer. Nobody else can improve. So Hülkenberg makes it through into the top 10 by a whisker, just a couple of hundredths of a second. Albon in the Williams is out. Gasly in the Alpine is out in 12th. Tsunoda in the AlphaTauri is 13th. Nick De Vries in the other AlphaTauri is 14th. And George Russell in the Mercedes, who did not get out to settle that time. He clambers out of his car as the team continue to work on the hydraulic issues that Mercedes is experiencing. And Russell making sure he goes round to each team member and gives them a pat on the back and a thanks for working so hard. Meanwhile, on track, cheers from inside the cockpit and in Esteban Ocon's Alpine, because he was 3rd fastest, 2.5 tenths off Verstappen, while his teammate down in 12th.
Yeah, Gasly pretty unhappy with that session. I don't know exactly what went wrong. There were quite a few cars that were setting good laps. Here's Gasly.
Sorry, mate, not much we can do with that.
So I think that.
What was he saying there? Yeah,
I didn't quite catch it, but there were quite a few cars that were setting good mini sectors early in the lap, and then they all seemed to just kind of fall off. And I don't know if there was a bit of traffic going on there. We saw a lot of oh my gosh! We're just getting a replay of Hülkenberg coming out of the pits from his final tyre change, and he catches his tyre man with the rear left corner and nearly flips the car.
Wow, and he immediately stops. He doesn't enter the fast lane, and he looks out to his left mirror to see what he's hit. Thankfully, he hasn't hit a person, none of his mechanics. It was the tyre, the front left tyre, which was positioned at a slight angle, but clearly, I think the FIA might look at that and go, well, how did that happen? Meanwhile, we are having another look at some replays, as I'm sure they're being played for the race control stewards to determine, well, is there any track limits exceeding going on? And meanwhile, we're just seeing some of the shenanigans that got going that we missed initially, and especially coming into that final corner. We've got 2 cars, 3 car wide coming into turn 10. They're all trying to start a lap, aren't they, and find themselves some time. And there's nearly a shunt at the back. Yuki Tsunoda speeds round turn 9 and gets greeted by an Alpine and another car, and has to take avoiding action. That is something has to be done about that, surely. That can't be on.
Yeah, I'm very surprised we haven't seen any message from the stewards about that, but it's exactly what Andrew was talking about yesterday. That turn 9 is effectively blind because it's downhill, and you've got foliage and trees on the inside of the apex, and you're coming at such high speed that if people do start backing up into that last corner, then it's a recipe for disaster. And we narrowly missed a huge accident there with about 5 cars involved.
There was a situation a couple of years ago when the drivers were all told that if they backed up between here's some radio from Tsunoda.
What's track limits? What's man?
I think that was a complaint about track limits. Anyway, the drivers were all told if they backed up in that area, they would get disqualified basically. And Fernando Alonso got caught up by a load of people backing up in that area, and nothing was done about it, and he got really cross about it. And then the next day he got cross because something else happened at turn 1 when someone wasn't penalised for going off track and gaining an advantage. And it is, as Jack says, it's a sort of recurring theme here, and I don't know what they do about it. You would think after like 10 years of this happening, someone might think, do you know what, maybe we should change something here.
Well, it was a different scenario, but was it Monza a few years ago as well? And of course, Monza, straight line speed is everything. They want to try and see if they can get a tow and they were all so close in Q3, packed up coming around the final corner, that only 2 cars made it across the line in time before the checkered flag came down. The rest of them all missed it because they were busy trying to get behind each other and make sure they had a good tow coming down into turn 1. So slightly different scenario, but it's not the first time we've seen sort of qualifying tactics go a bit messy.
Yeah, it's always a problem earlier in the first couple of sessions when you have more cars on track. Now that we're down to the final 10, it shouldn't be a feature in this session. Shouldn't be. That doesn't mean it won't be. But on the other hand, mentioning track limits, people have been generally much better behaved today, and I think that just comes from a expectation difference. You know, people have kind of recalibrated themselves. They knew that yesterday was a shambles in terms of that and how strict the marshals were going to be, and the drivers have come in with a different view today.
Meanwhile, Sergio Perez has succeeded in his basic aim of the day so far, which is to get into the final part of qualifying. But here's some radio from him.
There might be a few spots, turn 1, but not expecting it to be particularly heavy, just a few spots.
Okay, so the BBC weatherman Ian Ferguson did say earlier today on Twitter that it was going to rain sort of around about lunchtime after the sprint qualifying, before the sprint. So that's obviously Perez's engineer telling him that is about to happen, although not too badly by the sounds of it. Anyway, the point I was trying to make about Perez is that yes, he's made it into Q3 of this sprint, qualifying for the sprint, but he's not exactly excelled himself. He was 7/10 off Verstappen, his teammate, in the first session, and he's just nearly half a second behind him in the second session. So he's still got quite a lot of work to do to impress the Red Bull bosses, I would say.
Could that just be, though, I had a disaster yesterday, let's just do the bare minimum, get through, even if I am half a second, 8/10 off, at least I'm into the top 10, and now I suppose we will see what Perez has got.
Could be, we'll see.
I'm just trying to find a bit more optimism for him. The other side of the commentary box doesn't have as much. We are just about then going to get underway for 8 minutes of this top 10 shootout, and Max Verstappen is at the top of the queue at the end of the pit lane, but a huge plume of smoke has just erupted from the rear end of that Red Bull, Jack.
Yeah, quite odd. It was just a brief puff of about half a second, and it seems to have gone away. No more smoke coming from that Red Bull as they sit waiting for the green light. So fingers crossed he's going to be fine. But yeah, very peculiar.
Yeah, well, he does make it out because the green light has come on and he has made his exit to the roar of the Sea of Orange. The Dutch fans out in force here in the Styrian Mountains, absolutely packed to the rafters, and it will only get busier and busier. Verstappen heads out, Sainz follows, Ocon, Norris, Perez all making their way out now.
And the stewards are going to be busy between the qualifying session and the race, because they've just said that Nico Hülkenberg will be investigated after the session, that incident where he ran over his own tyre, for an unsafe release. And let's not forget, Charles Leclerc is also going to be investigated for impeding, who was it again, remind me?
I believe it was... I can't remember. I had to find
Oscar Piastri.
That was it?
Yeah, at the last corner, yeah.
Well done. Glad somebody remembered. Okay, just over 6.5 minutes then left of this top 10 shootout. So far, we have lost from 11th downwards Albon, Gasly, Tsunoda, De Vries, Russell, Zhou Guanyu, Piastri, Lewis Hamilton down in 18th, Bottas and Logan Sargent. That leaves the next 10, the top 10 grid slots to be filled for this afternoon's shorter sprint race that has been introduced in the last couple of years, the second of 6 that we will have this season, and where less points are given out. The top 8 receive points, is 8 for the winner, all the way down to 1 point for 8th. But every point counts in a championship, especially in the midfield pack that is as tight as it is, where mere points separate constructors, some just 1 point separating them. It can really mean the world of difference. Max Verstappen out there now, coming through the fast left-hander of 7 into the right-hand kink of 8. Purple sector 1, purple sector 2. Absolutely flying right now, just a couple of corners to go.
Yeah, he's about 1/10 up on Perez, who's following him on track. And he did have a brand new set of slicks compared to Perez, who looked like he had a slightly used set. So not a bad first 2 sectors from Perez, all things considered there. So 104.6 from Verstappen, pretty pacey, given the track conditions are probably still not 100%, and Perez losing a bit more time in that final sector, 4/10 off.
Yeah, interesting to note, Carlos Sainz is out there. He's on the medium compounder tyre, as is Nico Hülkenberg in the Haas. This is the sound of Lando Norris, who's been showing very well in an upgraded McLaren round the final corner, up through the gears, takes the line and puts his McLaren in between the 2 Red Bulls. Verstappen, Norris and Perez, the top 3. Here comes Sainz on those medium tyres. The DRS, the rear wing flap opens to give him a little bit of extra speed going down the straight, and it's enough for 5th for the Spaniard.
Yeah, not a bad lap on those mediums. It may just be that they elected to take a new set of mediums over a new set of softs, or a scrub set of softs, sorry, for this first run before they really get down to business on the second run. The two Aston Martins coming across the line now. First it's Alonso, pops up to P5, 105.6, so a second off Verstappen, not quite there. And Stroll coming across the line, he goes into P7, slowest of the runners that have actually completed a lap.
I can confirm, Jack, that used softs on Verstappen, Norris, Perez, Alonso, Ocon, Stroll and Magnussen, new mediums on Sainz and Hülkenberg.
Thank you, Andrew Benson. And that is one of the rules for SQ3. Drivers can use any set of soft tyres that they want if they get through to SQ3. This is the sound of Kevin Magnussen, who is having a much better day of it than his 19th place for the Grand Prix on Sunday will be. He's currently through into the top 10, fighting for 8th at the moment in this sprint shootout, which is where he goes. He's about 1.7 seconds off the pace at the moment. But the main worry for the Haas team is that, well, they've got this great qualifying pace, but it's no good. They just keep falling back in the race. So that's what they've been trying to work on this weekend. Let's see if it proves dividends in this afternoon's first bit of racing action. Charles Leclerc is next to cross the line as he makes his way through turn 9 and 10. The rear wing really wobbles as he clouts the curb, coming downhill onto the main straight to start his first one of his first flies. It will be his first fly.
Yeah, he's elected to come out a little bit later than others and try and use some of the clear air as the other guys all pit to take on their second set of tyres. He may just run through here, but he's already 2/10 off in sector 1, which is just one corner, turn 1 really, and then the long drag up to turn 3. So not the best start to the lap. He's on his way down to turn 4 now. The Ferrari looking fairly composed, although there's a little bit of a wiggle on the way in as he collects it up, gets through. No major dramas after that. Into turns 6 and 7. Looking not too shabby, but not using all the track as we've seen some of the other cars do. He's 3/10 off, so he's only lost a further 1.5, 2/10 in sector 2 to Verstappen. That's projecting him for a top 5 finish at the moment. Into turn 9 and 10. Car bottoming slightly through 9. Looks quite clean. And through 10. All neat and tidy and within the white lines. He comes across the line now, and it's P5 just behind his teammate, 6/10 off.
That's slower on the soft compounder tyre compared to Sainz's medium. I know there's different, they've been used, I think. Is that right?
Actually, Leclerc, this is what I was going to say. Jack nicely commented through the lap through it there. I was waiting for him to finish, wanted to hear what he was going to say. Leclerc's actually on new softs, so Jack made the point, is he going to run to the end of the session? I think he might. I think he might do a cool or 2 laps and then 1 more lap at the end, probably.
Okay, well, at the moment, where cars are on their outlaps, it's Verstappen fastest, ahead of Norris, Perez, Sainz, Leclerc, the top 5. Hülkenberg, Alonso, Ocon, Magnussen and Stroll, the top 10 at the moment. One of the big names to fall foul in this sprint shootout was Lewis Hamilton, down in 18th, and Lawrence Barretto caught up with him.
Lewis, a really frustrating session. Obviously, I saw you kind of put your arms on the steering wheel at the end of the session. I couldn't quite hear what you were saying on team radio. What kind of happened out there?
Just timing, it's not right.
Frustrating because obviously puts you in a really difficult position for later in the day.
Yeah, the sprint race doesn't really matter anyway, so today just have some fun from the back, and it is what it is. I don't really feel any way about it, to be honest. I wish I was still out there, but yeah, not today.
Is it the kind of thing that after the session you go and chat to the team, or do you just want to put it behind you and focus later on the session ahead?
No, there's nothing really to say. Just we'll focus on our job today, and could have easily been much further up there, but I'll just have a bit of fun at the back.
All right, good luck. Thank you.
Well, that was Lewis Hamilton, sounding a little bit dejected, but saying that he doesn't really care.
Classic Hamilton grumpy interview, that one, wasn't it? I've heard so many of them in my time.
Oh, sorry, Lawrence Barretto, for that, having to endure that one, but well done. But, well, if it doesn't really matter, then let's do a reverse grid race. Why not? Have a bit of fun from the back. Okay, well, 30 seconds left on the clock, and we are starting to get the final run of fast lap times. Verstappen coming through the middle sector is gearing up for a lap, but Alonso is coming into the final corner now. Personal best set to 1 and 2, 3 looking good as well. He's currently down in 7th, is Alonso, crosses the line, gets himself up into 5th in that Aston Martin. Nico Hülkenberg is looking good, as is Lance Stroll, up into 7th for the Canadian racer. Hülkenberg will be next to come across the line in the Haas, currently down in 9th. He's on the medium compound of tyre. There's the two Haas's occupying 9th and 10th at the moment. In the meantime, here comes Max Verstappen, purple sector 1, purple sector 2. He's currently provisional pole anyway, takes the line and finds over a 10th and a half. Max Verstappen then looking set to start the sprint race from pole position. Nobody is going any quicker. Carlos Sainz comes across the line and stays 5th. Nico Hülkenberg in the Haas with a brilliant lap time to get himself up into 4th. Perez slots into 2nd, almost half a second though back from Sergio Perez. This is the sound of Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari, who just come across the line now, and he is only 6th fastest, 0.8 of a second off of Verstappen and behind his teammate Carlos Sainz, and that is how they will end qualifying. So Max Verstappen does the double this weekend. He will start Sunday's Grand Prix from pole position, and he will start this afternoon's sprint race from pole position in front of his teammate Sergio Perez. Lando Norris with a fantastic 3rd place starting grid for the this afternoon's sprint. It's 4th as well tomorrow for the Grand Prix. Hülkenberg 4th, Sainz 5th.
I saw that at turn 3.
Yeah, tiny moment.
Yeah, about 10th and a half, I'd say. But that's another pole or sprint pole or whatever we call this one. That's a very good job. Nice and calm, well done.
Yeah, that was again well executed. Good job.
Yeah, well done, mate. We won't call that quali. That's grid position for the sprint race. Well done, sir.
I'm glad they don't really know what they're calling it either. Sainz 5th, Leclerc 6th, Alonso 7th, Stroll 8th, Ocon 9th, Magnussen in 10th. But absolutely shout-outs for Norris and Hülkenberg up in 3rd and 4th. Fantastic efforts from the McLaren and the Haas drivers. But as they pull into Parc Fermé, it's a familiar sight. It's Max Verstappen who calmly unbuckles his belts. The steering wheel is already out and rested on the front end of the car, and he clambers out. Perez joins him alongside. Norris already straight out of the car in his McLaren and celebrating with his team, but just a few handshakes and fist bumps all round for that one.
It's quite staggering that the gap from Verstappen to Perez is, well, it's half a second, and then the gap from Perez all the way down to 9th is just over 4 tenths. So he's just completely crushed the opposition there. It's quite an impressive lap. And then to say, oh yeah, there was a mistake at turn 3, 10th and a half there or something.
Ominous.
It's not good for the rest of the opposition, is it? Perez recovering somewhat to finish P2 in a cleaner session for him, but just so far off his teammate.
In the session that almost didn't really, I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but you know, when there's so much,
they all matter.
They all matter, but when there's so much less on offer, it's you know, really he should have done that yesterday in the Grand Prix qualifying when the pressure counted. But if Perez is on a bit of a bad run of it, let's be honest, in qualifying, because it's consistently happening. Does that get into your head? It's so easy to get in a bad form of things.
I think it's very difficult to shake that once you start having it repeat. And like we say, it's been 4 bad sessions for him, not counting this sprint shootout. You can't help but feel bad about it.
Well, we can hear from the top 3 with Naomi Schiff, starting with Max Verstappen, who will start from the front of the grid.
Congratulations, that is pole position for you today for the sprint race. How was it out there?
Yeah, I think it was good. I mean, of course, the track was drying up, so lap after lap you were improving. You had to be on the track at the right time. Of course, you know, today you don't have a lot of laps, you know, in every segment of qualifying. But I think we did well. The car was in a good window, good balance. So yeah, very happy, of course, to be first.
Well, yesterday things seemed a lot closer between you and the Ferraris than it was today. Today it's your teammate that will be lining up on the front row next to you, but half a second difference between the two of you. So it looks like it's going to be quite straightforward for you today.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, why? It's a bit different today, but also, the track is still not fully dry. But yeah, car's quick. That's the most important. And today, let's see over a stint how we will perform.
Lastly, I have to ask, track limits have been quite an issue in both qualifying sessions. How much of a concern is that going to be in the race today and tomorrow?
Yeah, it's quite difficult. I mean, of course, in qualifying, you really try to go to the limit, so naturally a bit more difficult in qualifying. But I think even in the race, it will be, for all the drivers, quite hard to manage around here.
Okay, well, we wish you the best of luck for the race later today.
So just Max, we were going to hear from there. Naomi Schiff doing the talking, and the Dutch fans out in force. A sea of orange in the grandstands will be loving this one. They look set for a rather good weekend once again. But we will have the sprint later on today, Jack. Is it tough to see anything past Verstappen?
It is at the moment, yeah. He's looking like he's on.
There is a threat of rain, though.
There is a threat of rain. I was just going to say he's on great form, and with his teammates struggling, it's hard to see someone else managing to beat him unless you throw in some jeopardy. And with a bit of rain or changeable conditions, we could absolutely get that this afternoon.
Okay, well, there are still a few things that are being investigated, but this is how it stands at the moment. Verstappen will start the sprint this afternoon from P1 in front of his teammate Sergio Perez, Lando Norris the top 3, Hülkenberg and Sainz the top 5, Leclerc, Alonso, Stroll, Ocon, Magnussen the top 10, Albon, Gasly, Tsunoda, De Vries, George Russell the top 15, Zhou, Piastri, Hamilton, Bottas and Logan Sargent 20th and last. Do keep abreast of the BBC Sport website for any updates in between now when we are next back on air for the sprint, which will be at 3:25 this afternoon, and you can hear it all on the BBC Sport website and the BBC Sport app. My thanks to Andrew Benson, Jack Aitken. We will see you then at 3:25 for the second sprint of the year. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.